So welcome to the Engineered Angler. My name's Franco. I'm a professional engineer, a lure designer, and lure maker. And I make these videos to try to share some of the techniques and tricks that I've come up with or learned along the way and try to add a little bit of engineering and physics to the art of lure making. And today my intention is to make a lure that anybody can make. If you're old enough to hold a couple of simple hand tools, you should be able to do this, even if you've never made a lure before. So we're going to try to keep it as simple as possible. We're going to do a no airbrush paint job. We're going to try to do our own simple and inexpensive eyes. And the lure we're going to make today is going to be a topwater frog. And we're not going to make it out of a block of wood. We're going to make it out of a ball. These little 1-inch round balls made out of, I believe, basswood. These are cheap and easy to find in most hobby stores and craft stores. And this is not the first lure I made out of one of those little wooden balls. I made this little crawfish crankbait. Now this one was a little more complicated. So I'm going to try to make this lure as easy to make but still be a good looking lure. And of course, as always with an engineered angler lure, it's going to have to work. All right, let's get started. So our drawing is going to be as simple as the lure build itself. We'll have our ball, an eye, and we'll have a little bit of a divot, just a shallow kind of carved out area to sort of represent the mouth, and we'll make some little rubber frog legs that will embed in the body. And the hardware is going to be super simple. I'll tie an eye in the front and a hook hanger eye in the back just below the center line. We'll add a counterweight just about in line with the eyes, and I'm going to show you how to get all that stuff aligned on that little ball. It's not hard, but it's a little tougher than working with a little rectangular block. And this little ballast weight is a number 7 split shot, which is about 1.15 grams. So let's start off with a list of things you need. You gotta have balls. I think anybody will tell you that. Wire to make the hook hanger and the tie-on eye. And to keep it simple, we're gonna use a paper clip. We'll need a hook and a split ring and the number 7 split shot. Some craft paint or spray paints if you have them. Some pre-made eyes would be nice, but they're optional. We can make our own or we can paint them on. And we'll need some spray clear coat. And that's it. And I think a lot of that stuff you might find at home already. Oh wait, one more thing, a rubber band. And while I'm thinking about it, let's go ahead and delete this split ring. We'll just make it so the hook is directly connected to the twist eye. Now as far as the treble hook goes, you can either use a number 6 or a number 8. I'm going to go with a slightly larger one, the number 6, since we're only going to have one hook on this thing. And that's what our split shot looks like. That's a number 7 split shot. And so those two things are going to be the two things you're actually going to have to go to a tackle shop for. So the first thing you want to do with your ball is to search around on the ball to see if you can find the little swirl mark that actually is where they held it and turned it to a nice ball shape. And you'll find one 180 degrees from each other. So there's one right there and one right there. And you want to mark those. So I'm going to take a pencil and I'm going to draw a little X right on the spot, and I'll do the same thing on the other one. And so just to let you guys know, I'm going to try to do this as precisely as possible, but it really doesn't matter that much. Precision really is more for aesthetic than functionality. I want it to look good. I want the eyes to look like they're in the right place. But you can do all this sort of by eyeballing, or you can follow the instructions. They're pretty simple. So now I'm going to hold the ball and so that I can see pretty much both of my marks, and then just come up to the very highest point and make a little mark. Again, not precision, but trying to get it close. And I'll do the same thing on the other hemisphere here. Now the idea is to run a line all the way around, connecting all those marks. Now you can just do it by hand and just sort of sketch it in, or you can take a thin piece of tape, and I'm going to go ahead and just slice a little thin piece, and then I'll just line it up with one of the little swirl marks, bring it all the way around, line it up with the next one, and then I'm just going to draw a line along that tape. And if you're working with a kid, you can put the tape on and let them sketch it in. Then when you pull the tape off, you should have a line that kind of divides the ball pretty much in half. The next thing I want to do is draw a circle centered on the little hash mark that we made at the swirl mark, and it needs to be about 7/8 in diameter. And I know that sounds like it's going to be tough to do, but you can pick up just about anything. This little piece of PVC fitting is the ideal thing. If you happen to have a 1/2-inch female fitting, let's go ahead and get a bottle of water, and we're going to use the cap off of this. All right. And if you look at it, there's a little tiny dot in the middle that marks the exact middle. So I'm going to take a razor knife and just cut an X starting from the very center towards the edge. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just the idea is that the peaks of the X are right at the center. and you can see those peaks sticking up. And I'm just going to cut off the very end of the points of those little triangles. And that'll leave us a nice little window in the middle to be able to look through and align the center to draw this circle. So what you want to do now is just randomly put a mark on the very edge with a Sharpie, and then rotate it around and eyeball about 1/3 of the way around the circumference of this bottle cap. And then I want to put a dot right in the middle between the two. Okay, now take the bottle cap and I'm going to put it so I can center my little end hash mark where the little swirl was right on my little window, and my little center mark on the edge with my line that goes around the ball. Now you just draw a line the circumference of the ball cap and make a mark for the two spots 1/3 of the circumference around. So these two marks you just put in are for the eyes. I'm going to do the same thing with the bottle cap on the other end of the ball. Again, centering my little hash mark on my window. Now I'm going to make sure that it's parallel with the line I've already drawn, just kind of eyeballing it. And we'll draw a line around that too. All right, then we'll take the little 3 marks on the cap and align the center one with the center line. Last time we did it on this side of the ball. This time we're going to do it on the other side of the ball. So one will be the eyes, and these next marks will be where the legs go. And now just eyeballing between the little end cross hatching of the end of the ball, if there is such a thing, to this line we just drew halfway between, that's where our hook is going to be. All right, we've got all the marks in there. All I'm going to do now is just take something really sharp. You can use a nail, you can use an awl, and I'm just going to put a divot to mark each one of these spots because we don't want to lose them when we start painting. So now you got the nose and the 2 eye marks, and then the tail hook and the 2 leg marks. All right, so the next process you can do with a drill, but I'm going to do it by hand just because I feel I have a little more control and it doesn't take that much longer. So on the very front where we put that divot where the tie-on eye is going to go, I'm just taking a small bit and just by hand I'm just going to take some material out. And if the bit is sharp, it should only take a few turns. Now I'm going to move up to the next size bit and do the same thing. And I'm going to keep moving up in bits till I have a nice little indentation that's going to kind of look like a mouth. And I think this will be the biggest size, 5/16, but I'm not going to go its full diameter. Just going to take a little more material out. And there you go. Looks kind of like a Death Star. All right, I'm going to drill a hole where the hook hanger is going to go. And I'm going to go in about a 1/2 inch. I'm not going to install the hook hanger right now, but I do need something to hold on to this thing with. And I'll stick a little paneling nail in there. And that's just temporary so I can hold on to it while we get started with painting. Okay, I'm just sticking on some eyes just temporarily, just so you can get a feel for the location of everything. So you can see where the eyes are, and now you can see that the mouth kind of makes sense. Now along the circular line that goes to the bottom of the lure, and right where it crosses the other circular line that goes across the bottom and top, that is where we want to drill a hole for our counterweight. And we need to drill a 1/4 inch hole, but I'm going to drill a pilot hole first. And it's just got to be deep enough to drop the split shot into. And we'll fill in this hole with some crazy glue and a little bit of baking soda. So first we get a little bit of crazy glue in there. And I've got the baking soda in a little bottle with a little nozzle on it. And I like to put a drop on top afterwards and let that soak in. And after it's set up, I'll go ahead and sand that down nice and flush. All right, that's nice and smooth. Now I'm just going to go ahead and wipe it down with some alcohol, and we'll let that evaporate off before we paint. So because we're going to be doing this paint job without an airbrush, I had to look for alternative ways to actually put a nice paint job on and maybe add some texture and some patterns too. So I went to my local dollar store and picked up a few things that I thought might help. None of this stuff is on my list of all the things you're going to need. I got some sponge brushes, and these will be for putting the broader layers of paint on. I got some cheap little art brushes, and these will be more for the detail areas. And then to apply some texture, I got this coarse sponge and this little scrubbing pad that has almost like a tire tread on it. Of course, I bought some children's paints. You can use whatever paint you want. If you have a bunch of colors in spray paint, well, then use those. Or if you typically airbrush and you're just doing this to include some kids, go ahead and use your airbrush paints. And then I also got a variety pack of colored permanent markers. All right, so the first thing I want to do is start with some white, and I didn't get any kids paint in white, so I'm just going to use my Testors white. I think this is going to work just fine. Now I'm going to probably paint almost all of it yellow. It's a nice yellow. Alright, let's see if we could spread it a little more evenly with the artist brush. So we'll probably take a couple of coats to get this nice and bright and yellow. And this might come out really nice, or it might be one of those things that it just incentivizes you to get yourself an airbrush. Alright, so I've taken a dollop of every one of the colors, actually except for yellow. And the idea is I'm going to spread it out and use a sponge, actually a piece of the sponge, as a stamp. I'll just kind of soak it and stamp it. Now, I've already done a little bit of trial. This is just a PVC tube, and you can see the kind of patterns you can actually develop on this thing. It's pretty cool, but the more you put on, the more sort of muddled and undefined the pattern is. So really, less is more in this situation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the darkest of the greens, and I'm going to stamp a pattern on here, just like from the very top down about 2/3 of the way down, and leave the belly yellow. That's the plan anyway. So I'm just going to smear this out. And the idea, like I said, it's like using it like a stamp, and you don't want to get a lot on there. So I'm going to go across the top first, and I'm going to try not to move it, because the more you move, the more it smears. So the idea is to have a nice clean stamp. And I think that's all I'm going to do, because I think any more than that and it'll start looking just a little too mixed up and undefined. So the only thing else I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the inside of the little mouth divot red. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to let this dry a little bit, and I'm going to give this thing its first clear coat just to protect all the paint, so we can work on putting the eyes on and finishing drilling the holes for the tie-on eye and where the legs are going to go in. And I'm using this Krylon clear enamel. It's indoor outdoor and it's gloss. So I'm going to go ahead and give it the first maybe 2 coats, and then we'll get to the assembly. Okay, spoiler alert, I'm also painting another one with the airbrush. I'm painting it with the same colors, but I'm using my airbrush paints, and I'm trying to get the same kind of pattern in there, just so you can see what a difference it makes just to have an airbrush. Also, I want to have something that looks really sharp for a thumbnail. So while the clear coat dries, I'm going to go ahead and make our twist eyes out of these little paper clips. So I'm just straightening out the paper clip, and then I'll find the middle more or less, and then wrap it around this little peg, which is just a drill bit in here, and you can use a small nail if you want to. Then I'll grab the ends with a pair of locking pliers and just twist as I pull and get a nice tight twist on it, and that's what it should look like.
This next one will have the hook attached to it, and we'll go through the same process, bending it, and then I'll thread the hook onto the loop, put it back on the peg, grab it with those pliers again, and just twist as I pull. Trim it, and it's ready to go into the lure.
So we'll just grab a rubber band out of the bag, and I'm going to snip through it and then lay it out and cut it around 3 inches. Now you got to clean the rubber band pretty thoroughly with some alcohol or acetone if you have it. The idea is to get all the dust and all the oils from manufacturing, get it good and clean. This way, when we go to put some color on it, the color will stay. Then I want to take it and stick it to a piece of masking tape. Press it down so it's nicely stuck. Now I'm actually going to draw out what these little legs are going to look like. And I'll put a line right at the 1.5 mark, which is midway. I'm going to draw a skew here, about a 45-degree angle, and then I'm going to draw the leg. The line here is the base, and so that'll be kind of narrow, so it'll fit in the body. And then I expand out, and just about when I get about 1/2 inch from the tip, I go ahead and swing out. And then we do the little Kermit the Frog hands kind of thing. Do the same thing on the other side. And now you just cut them out. It's easier to cut them while they're stuck to the tape. And this is actually easier than it looks like. And I'll cut that skew for the feet, boom, and then cut out the little triangles in between the toes. Then I'll do the other one, and it's just a matter of getting them colored. Working with them stuck to a piece of tape actually helps. I'm just going to take off the ink that I used to outline them, and I'm just using alcohol for that. Now I'm going to go ahead and put a bunch of yellow Sharpie on here. And this is like a dark metallic Sharpie. And I'm going to go ahead and just put a bunch of dots. Make it look almost scaly. And I'll put a little bit of orange in there too. Alright, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And then we'll get back to the lure. Now we could paint the eye on and just use some sort of hole pattern and either a Sharpie or a brush or even that sponge, and you could put in a light color and then maybe draw in a line for that sort of frog horizontal pupil. But I really want it to be a little more 3D, so I'm going to use some of these little half beads. You can see it's just a plastic bead with a pearlescent finish, so all you need is a horizontal pupil. So let's select a color. I think the purple and the green is just not something I want to use. The yellow kind of blends in too much with the yellow we have, and blue, I'm not too sure about that. But I think I can find a color in here. Maybe just a pearl white will work just fine. And these I got at Walmart, and I think they're like 94 cents, something like that. So they're really inexpensive. You can pick them up just about anywhere they sell craft stuff, and they're usually super cheap. So I'm going to go ahead and go with the pearl whites. To draw in the little horizontal pupil, I punched this hole out of this piece of paper plate, and I'm going to use this just to hold it. And that also kind of limits how far the pen will go side to side, which makes it look a little nicer so that it doesn't just go all the way from edge to edge. And then I'm just gonna run that line across there. And I think that looks pretty good, pretty subtle. I think I'll darken it in the middle just a little more, and then I'll do the other one. All right, that should do it. We can glue it on the ball as soon as that first coat is dry. Before I put the eyes on, I want to go ahead and drill the last of the holes. I need to drill a hole for the tie-on eye right in the middle of that red dot. I need to drill the 2 holes for the legs and re-drill the hook hanger hole. And for the legs, I'm only going in maybe 3 seconds. What's that? Something like 5 millimeters. All right, that's got it. Now let's glue on the eyes. I'm gonna put a little drop right in the middle, right where that little divot is where we marked it. And then not only do I have to put it right in the right spot, but that little pupil has to be aiming in the right direction. All right, that's one. See if I can get the other one on there. All right, that's not too shabby. It looks pretty uniform right like that. All right, and then to glue the tie-on eye on, I'm just gonna put a good amount of crazy glue right on the twisted eye and then shove this in there, get it nice and straight before that crazy glue sets. And that'll hold it really well. And I'll put another little droplet of crazy glue right down in there using this wire. And that's just gonna fill the hollow. And we'll do the same thing for the tail hook. All right, it's starting to look a little bit like a lure. I'm gonna be able to hold it now with my little holder here, and that'll keep the hook away from the body. And now I'm gonna put just probably, oh no, maybe 5 coats of clear coat before we put the legs on. Starting to look kind of shiny, but this is going to take a while. So I'm going to go ahead and just let this dry for probably 30 minutes and then give it another coat. And I'm probably going to do that until I have probably 5 coats on this thing. So that'll take most of today. So I'm about to give this thing its last coat, which will be like, I think the 5th coat. But I wanted to show you just how glossy you can make a lure just with a spray can. This stuff really gives you a nice, pretty smooth, glossy finish. And before anybody goes wild in the comments, I know this is not going to be as resistant to damage as UV resin or even 2-part resin. But it's pretty nice, quick, it's cheap, and you don't need any special tools, a turner, or anything like that. All right, we'll do this. It'll dry overnight, and then first thing tomorrow, I'll put the legs on, and we'll go out in the lake. And hopefully, we'll have decent weather. Either way, we're going to get out in the lake. All right, it's a brand new day. Let's go ahead and put the legs on this thing. Check it out. I ended up actually making 3 of them. All of them finished just a little differently, from being airbrushed and pretty refined all the way to looking like maybe a kid made it. But as always, I'll have a slideshow at the end of the video and I'll showcase all of them. Let's put the legs on this. All right. And this is as simple as just putting a dollop of crazy glue on there and shoving it in the hole. The only thing you got to kind of keep track of is the curvature of the leg, and I like to have it curving in. It looks a little more natural. Little drop of crazy glue on the very tab here that I made. I'll let it run down to the end and then just poke it in there. And I'll just let that set for a second before I do the other one. All right, and then just to be sure that they don't come out, I'll put a couple little drops on the outside of it and let that set. Let's go down to the lake. All right, it's overcast and kind of windy out today, but I'm going to go ahead and show you what they look like in the water, one at a time, starting with the most sort of refined paint job. This is the one I did with the airbrush, and it's got the different legs. All right, let's get this thing in the water. All right, we're gonna start off with the one we made for the video. A lure like this is really a finesse lure. You don't want to move it too fast or too much. It's just a sort of a wiggle, and then just let it sit. The wind is really swirling around, even in these areas where I'm kind of protected by the trees. I have no real way to hold my position. So I'm casting it along the grass's edge, but I'm not too worried about getting into the thin grass. Like the stuff right on the edge doesn't seem to really hang up on it too much. I switched to the darker one. I fished all the areas where I was protected from the wind, and I switched out between the 3 frogs, and I even swapped out to other topwaters and even some soft plastics. And as the day wore on, the sun got a little brighter, but the wind kept picking up more and more. It was a really pretty day on the lake, but unfortunately, the fish didn't cooperate. So thanks to everybody who watched it to this point, and I hope everybody got something out of this video. Don't forget to like, and if you're not subscribed, certainly subscribe. And as promised, here's a slideshow of the 3 frogs.